In a world with artificial intelligence, how do we transform education? Thanks for tuning in. I'm Daniel Lopez, and this is the AI Education Conversation, where we explore the opportunities, risks, and impacts of AI across education. If you'd like to join the conversation, check out the AIeducationconversation.com. Let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Today marks 1 year since I recorded my first episode of the AI Education Conversation. I'm so proud of the fact that this podcast and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. are inextricably linked in my head. Now, you all might know, I don't know if this is a holiday that's celebrated in other countries as well, but here in the United States, this is Martin Luther King Jr. Day weekend, if you will. And we normally have the Monday off to commemorate the significance, the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, I say that my podcast and Dr. MLK Jr. Day are linked not because I'm Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I think I can only hope over the course of my life to aspire to make even a small percentage of the social impact that he made during his lifetime. But we do have a couple of connections that I will always cherish and will always make this holiday even more significant for me. So the first one being that when I was starting my AI learning journey during the winter break of 2023 last year, I really became obsessed with exploring AI's potential to transform education. Something in me was awakened as I went down this rabbit hole of exploring and interacting with and playing around with ChatGPT. But I was also coupled with this pang of fear and concern for two different reasons. Number one, I was afraid that AI technology that I was experiencing and playing around with right now, that it was going to continue to be developed and implemented in schools without considering the real perspectives of educators and students. Because the reality is as many folks who work in schools already know, this continues to happen. And this has happened so many times before, where there's these half-baked products that are introduced and implemented into schools, and they do more harm than they do good. The second reason I was nervous and afraid was because my inner voice kept telling me that I should start a podcast. And the reason why I think is because I've loved listening to podcasts, and I think my perspectives being an educator, someone who had a decade worth of experience in the education space while also being on this AI learning journey, that it might provide a platform for us to have meaningful conversations about AI and education, but by educators, not by folks in the ed tech space who have never taught or worked in schools before or are thinking about it from a product standpoint. I was on the fence when I decided to start this podcast. I'd never done anything related to podcasting before besides being a very avid consumer, but I decided to take action. And I was very nervous. I think if you listen to anybody who's listened to that first episode knows how nervous I was and about just putting myself out there. And you can listen to the difference in just overall sound quality and experience from the first episode where I knew nothing compared to the episodes I'm putting out today. But I was nervous about putting myself out there, and since I had been going through this reflection around Martin Luther King Jr. Day last year, I actually had this reflection where I started to just think about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and I thought about the fact that even as charismatic and amazing as he was, I'm sure that he was probably pretty nervous about putting himself out there in pursuit of social equity, social justice, right? The civil rights movement that he played such a vital role in leading. And so that was something I thought about. Is like, okay, if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. can do something like this, I can start a podcast. The second connection that I will continue to have and hold in my mind, it's a more trivial one, but it's an important one for me. We both had educational journeys at Boston University. So I think anybody who knows me personally knows that so much of who I am as a person and why I care so much about helping young people realize their dreams after high school by finding an institution that will help them sharpen their strengths is because of my experiences at Boston University. It was walking down to my mailbox when I was a senior in high school, opening up that acceptance letter to Boston University, and then being able to attend Boston University for 4 years has continued to be one of the greatest chapter of my life. And I one thing that is clear to any BU alum that you talk to is that Dr. King's legacy lives on in a very strong way at Boston University. And I just feel grateful to be an alumni alongside him at Boston University. So all that to say, today's a really big day for me, and there's so much that I'm reflecting on in this season as we really kick off the year here and kick off our many episodes that we have planned for this year. Some other things I'm reflecting on, and I'm proud of the fact that I did take the leap to create this platform because it has led to so many connections with amazing people across the world I likely would not have met otherwise. Being in my comfortable little silo of college access, doing the work of supporting students that I was so comfortable in. And since January 2023 of last year, I've been able to spend more than 1,000 hours exploring, engaging, and practicing with artificial intelligence. And I got to be honest, this journey and so the multitude of time I've spent here has only strengthened my position that AI is going to transform education, and I want to play a role at making it happen and making it happen in a way that is student and educator and school centered. I also don't do this often because, I think it can lead to some, frustrations or some of that achievement mindset and some of those things. And I don't think those things are always good because for me, this is mostly about the learning journey. But I did also take some time during the reflection season that I'm in around this 1 year to pause and actually just kind of measure real outcomes related to the impact of this conversation. Very concretely, like, how is it going? How is this podcast going? What are we learning? Is it actually making the kind of impact that I want it to have, given the amount of time I'm spending investing in this podcast, learning about AI, connecting with people? Is it actually making a real impact? So, anybody who has a podcast knows that it can be difficult to assess like real concrete analytics given the multitude of platforms that your podcast may live on. But a couple of like recent measures came onto my radar, which allowed me to think about the impact of my podcast. There is a business leader and content creator, which I really enjoy consuming his media, named Alex Hormozy. He also mentioned about having more than 21 episodes places your podcast in the top 1% of podcasts on the market. Because the reality is that most of the podcasts that start don't ever make it past 21 episodes. As of this episode, as of today, we're at 37 and counting. There's plans to make a whole lot more than the 34 we ended at last year in this upcoming year. So I'm really proud of that. We're continuing this journey. There's no plans to quit. We have so many more conversations and perspectives to bring into this space. The second thing is I had spent some time looking at some common podcast analytics sites, and one that really stood out to me was the some of these statistics from a site called thepodcasthost.com. And on this website, I saw this article where they were sharing some rough analytics that if you are receiving more than 478 downloads in the first 7 days of your episode releasing, that puts you in the top 10% of podcasts today. So I'm proud to say that in year one, we've been able to achieve both of those milestones. And it's all thanks to you. It's the amazing supporters who are on your own AI learning journeys. You're listening to the show, you're consuming AI, you're sharing with your colleagues, you're rating episodes, you're subscribing, and you are also making the dedication to make this space, this conversation, this podcast a special place where we can learn about AI and education from guests who really get it, who really understand what it's going to take to implement this in a way that is going to support our young people and transform education. So, as we continue on this journey together, I just want to continue to invite you all to support in any way that you're able to, subscribing on your favorite platform where we're available. If you wouldn't mind just really quickly rating some of those, rating wherever you listen, whether it's Apple, Spotify, YouTube. And then again, just sharing with your colleagues. If there's certain episodes or moments that stand out to you, being able to share that with your colleagues. Feel free to also message me on LinkedIn or on by emailing me. My email is available at the AI education conversation.com. It's the AI ed convo at Gmail. Let me know your thoughts. If there's certain episodes you like, if there's certain feedback you have on how we can make it better, the goal is to make this a space where we can all learn and make sure that anything that we are implementing within education around AI is going to actually serve schools and help them to transform positively, not become a nuisance, not make it more difficult than what it already is. Beyond that, just if I could get on my soapbox for a moment here, I would also say that I'm hoping that every single person that is listening to this is planning on doing something scary this year. If I could just offer a quick note of advice from year one of doing this, when I was really scared to put myself out there, create a podcast and do it, it's that the reality is life is scary, and you're only going to continue to grow if you push yourself past your comfort level, you try something new, you try something you're not good at, and you experience discomfort. So do something scary this year. If your inner voice is telling you to start that podcast, write that book, run a marathon, skydive, or whatever else is drawing you, but mentally it just feels like an insurmountable hurdle, the best advice I could use is just turn off your brain. Turn off your brain and just start. Don't listen to your brain. Don't listen to that inner voice. Just start. So we're going to be releasing also another episode of the AI education conversation later this week. But I just wanted to take some time to say thank you for 1 year of support. And then with that, I also wanted to just share a few of my favorite learnings from year one of the AI education conversation. I'll also be sure to reference the episode so that if you're interested in checking them out, some of my reflections, whether you are listening to it for the first time or you're re-listening, that you're able to do so. So I have 5 quick reflections I wanted to share with you, and we'll go in from 5 all the way down to my favorite moment, number 1 here. But I would say number 5, starting with number 5, my fifth biggest learning this year is that there's some AI applications that are actually really scary and we need to be diligent in responding to them. And I think really specifically what I mean when I'm talking about scary AI applications, I'm really talking about deepfakes. In episode 12 of the podcast titled Pope Francis poses in a puffer jacket, I really brought the initial introduction to what deepfakes are. I talked about how AI tools are really advancing. And then I talked about popular media that had been created around that February March timeline, which were it kind of aligned with what deepfakes are, AI generated content. Most recently, however, we also had another example of this where Dr. Siwei Liu, who's been in the game studying media integrity for the last 20 years, he came on and he gave us his perspective of deepfakes, their advancement, what we can do to respond. So that was a really fantastic episode and conversation with Dr. Liu. I learned so much from him. And I think if you're really interested in exploring more about how AI applications can be a little scary, but also how we can respond to them, I think those 2 episodes really stand out to me as places where you can deepen your knowledge, especially around deepfakes in year 1. Number 4, I think something else that really stood out to me is the fact that there are a lot of clear use cases for using AI tools to make an impact in college access. Now, anybody who's listened to this show for a while knows that that's my jam. I love college access. I've spent most of my career in education directly advising young people in through the college and financial aid processes, leading teams that are doing this work of advising, and then leading full functions where I'm leading multiple teams with the pursuit of helping young people do this. So this is my jam. That's what I love. That's my mission. Beyond talking about and now exploring AI for transforming schools. But there was a couple of moments, as you can imagine, based on my big passion within education, where this really stood out. In episode 10, as an example, I shared a way you could use AI tools to analyze student financial aid letters that I had discovered. I shared that study with some of my counseling colleagues in large Facebook groups. I also shared it on LinkedIn. And that was by far one of the big viral moments, if you will, I had when sharing some of the work I had been doing around AI. I think at the time, a lot of folks didn't even realize you could use Gen AI tools to do that type of analysis on something that was so critical for students. So that was really exciting, and I was happy to make that impact. I think the exciting part is even today, around 7 months after this, that process has only gotten easier. And I'll be sharing in the future more ways that I think you can use AI tools to help young people through the college and financial aid processes. The other place where we really highlighted AI tools and possibilities and use cases within college access specifically was in my conversation with my colleague Adam Seidel, who also works for One Goal. We had a great conversation and we talked through a lot of different ways that AI tools can help young people in college access, as well as some of the biggest hurdles that they're experiencing today in the field. Very similarly, I had a conversation with someone who I really look up to and admire within the field, who's already done so much to support students and professionals in college access, Marie Bigham. We also talked through the tremendous potential for how AI can not only support college advisors, but also the higher education professionals on the other side of the aisle, if you will, as well. Number 3, one of my other favorite moments from this first year of doing the podcast was really just hearing the reactions from practitioners doing the work of implementing AI in schools and what it's actually like. I think especially given at the beginning of this chat GPT journey in the first couple of months, I think folks were a little unsure as to whether or not this very transformational technology, how it was being received by schools. There had not been a lot of data, surveys, or assessments or reflections really at the time. I think we know a lot more now, 1 year later, based on some surveys, assessments, articles, those things that have come up. But at the time, it wasn't as clear. But there were some conversations that really stood out to me that gave me a pretty good understanding of how the education landscape is receiving AI. In my episode with Dr. Neka McGee, as an example, Dr. McGee, she's the chief academic officer of a public school district in Texas. She walked through real logistical challenges from a systems level leader perspective, as well as some of the mindset shifts across the district that will need to happen to see systematic adoption. She's one of the first people I talked to who both had the systems level leader education experiences as well as pretty deep AI education experiences through her own scholar journey in that from that regard. I also had the opportunity to talk with Amanda Bickerstaff. A lot of people I know who listen to this know Amanda. She's leading some fantastic work with the organization AI for Education, which she founded. And through her work, she has been consulting schools and districts across the country, really hyper focused on AI implementation and how to do that very thoughtfully, ethically, and safely. So I think Amanda, very similar to Dr. McGee, as well as just my own observations in talking with schools across Massachusetts and in Texas, she had similar reflections, which is in 2023, though we were talking about how excited we were about this technology, we were seeing a lot of data that the workforce is responding very differently in terms of this was causing some big disruptions. There were a lot of use cases where they were experimenting. She was one of the first people who came onto the podcast and really shared my perspective of feeling like, hey, we keep talking about the transformative potential for AI in schools, but a lot of schools aren't even thinking about AI right now. They're not experimenting with it, they're not adopting it. So let's make sure we're also calling it for what it is, which is that in of itself is a data point we need to hold and think about, which is we're so excited about the transformational potential of AI, but if the majority of schools across the country aren't even talking about it, that's a big hurdle in terms of implementation. So I thought that was really interesting. We had a really great conversation, which I think for any of you who are really interested in learning about the real work it takes to implement things in schools, that's definitely a great episode to listen to. And then finally, one of my friends and just a supporter of the show from the very beginning, Michael Smith. Michael, he really gave us his perspective on how a different country, if you will, Australia, how they are receiving and responding to AI developments through his lens as an educator in Tasmania. It was really interesting to just talk to Michael here, where there were some common reactions to how it's being implemented and received here in the United States versus how it might be different. My second big reflection is really also just about how the future of work is going to change in a world of artificial intelligence. And I think we had so many amazing guests who talked about it from different perspectives here in a recent episode. Dr. James Hudson, as an example, he gave us a tremendous historical and academic perspective on how artificial intelligence may lead to the evolution of artistry in content creation, which I think is so critical to think about given that so many of our young people right now they're really into that. They want to be artists, they want to be content creators, but already those fields are going to change pretty drastically based on the AI tools that are available. Corinne Hoisington, she also gave us a broader perspective on how AI will be disrupting major workforce sectors through her experiences as a career and technical education professor. And she was talking about spaces where she projects there to be big disruptions happening. Finally, the manufacturing millennial, Jake Hall, he gave us some really great insights as to how artificial intelligence and automation are going to be revolutionizing manufacturing and changing the job landscape there as well. there has been this perception in year one of AI tools that it is mostly disrupting white collar professions, which I think there's some truth to that. But I think Jake's perspective really showcased as well how some of the AI tools we now have in automation are also revamping more physical sectors like manufacturing. I think my biggest takeaway of the year, though, was some of the exciting, really concrete ways that schools are already actually using AI in their schools to promote learning, support, and safety. And I think there was a lot of examples of this in year one of the podcast. So I think one example was an organization called Alongside, which they're a mental health support organization. They have an AI powered app that is intended to provide tier one mental health support to students in schools. And I think we all know how important this is right now, given the scarcity of counseling professionals in schools and the rise of mental health challenges in young people, especially post pandemic. And so, alongside provided a really clear application use, and they're already partnering with schools across the United States where they're able to make a real impact along the lines of mental health. Zero Eyes. Zero Eyes has developed AI gun detection applications, which ensure that schools have a tremendously rapid response to any active shooter situations. Now, let's be honest, I don't like talking about school shootings. I don't like spending any time thinking about that. That's not fun to do. But the reality is that this actually happens way more than it should, especially in the United States. And I'm really grateful that there are organizations who are thinking about this and providing AI detection tools that are ethical, that don't do things like facial recognition, that really focus on the objects. And the impact of that is it makes schools safer places. So, not really an exciting place to think and spend a lot of time thinking about, but if you are interested to see how they how their software works and how it makes schools safer, would definitely invite you to go check out their episode. Quill.org. They talked about how they are improving the writing experience for young people, even in a world of AI, where you can snap your fingers, write a little sentence in prompt, and you can get an AI tool to write an essay for you in seconds. But they're talking about how their tool works, how it can actually improve writing and feedback and personalization within young people. And we also spent a lot of time talking about how we need to work to redefine the relationship students have with writing. So I think if you believe that AI tools mean the death of the essay, I think I would really invite you to go back and listen to that episode because I think we provided some really interesting insights as to how that might not be true. And if we redefine the relationship students have with writing, it can lead to students being very interested in continuing to develop their writing skills. And I think finally, I wanted to also give a shout out to Stephen Eno because Stephen, as a teacher for Da Vinci Schools, he gave us a really great use case for how he is encouraging all of his students to follow their ikigai. And ikigai is a Japanese term for the intersection of passions, purpose, and strength. And through his AI powered platform called Project Leo, he's encouraging students to not only identify and follow their ikigai, but also the platform helps students with differentiating different project modalities using AI to help them essentially create learning opportunities that they're really excited about and that align to their passions and interests. So, those were some of my favorite reflections and episodes throughout the year here. 2024, it's going to be a pivotal year in continuing this conversation about the opportunities, risks, and impact of AI in education. And I'm going to continue to push this conversation where I can, especially in our space here together. Want to finally end this episode by just giving a big shout out to all of you once again for supporting and to also to all of the amazing guests that have given time to come onto this show to talk about AI in year one of the AI education conversation. If you have any other thoughts on today's episode, or if you'd like to share some of your favorite guests or some of your favorite moments from year one, I'd love to hear about it. You can join the conversation at the AIeducationconversation.com or send me a message on LinkedIn, whatever you prefer. Humans at the heart of education. I'll see you next episode.